Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Joe Samaniego here, along with Kobe. Tonight, we also have Tanner Smith from the Pitbox Press, Matthew Bro from the GridNetworkTV.com. Article on the way. Be sure to visit our website. And a big thank you to everyone that has been supporting us, especially through Patreon. Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month right here on YouTube. And of course, you could do a one-time Buy Me a Coffee YouTube Super Chat. We appreciate all the Super Chats we got yesterday during Grid Live After Dark. The F1 team really appreciated. And of course, link in the video description to all our social medias and our website, gridnetworktv.com. Read all the latest articles from Matt involving NASCAR, see the team bio, and go from there. Gentlemen, let's get started with what I thought was going to be a race. We'll be talking about domination, comparing William Byron to the T-Rex car that dominated the All-Star race by Jeff Gordon. I feel like that should have been the throwback car paint scheme. But once he got stuck in dirty air, everything changed on that last green flag pit stop run. Just struggling to get up towards the front, looked like Tyler Reddick was going to steal a win. But he lost the lead to Ryan Blaney, who was just catching him, had a little bit extra fresher tires, the second best car, because he was able to make passes. You might even say maybe the best car, because Byron's just seen once he was in the dirty air, could not do anything. But then a caution with 4 laps to go truly changed the outcome of this race. Came down to pit stops. Denny Hamlin, 9.2 pit stop time, the quickest. He gets out in the lead. No looking back, and especially when they went 3 wide for second place. Race over. Denny Hamlin, 2 in a row, steals this one from essentially William Byron, Tyler Reddick, and Christopher Bell. Also, Ryan Blaney. I have to ask you, Matt, starting with you, a win is a win. That's all that matters. The pit crews, they're just as important. They win races like they did here. But overall, do you feel this will be viewed as he stole this one?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because a win is a win, absolutely. And I think a lot of people fail to remember at the end of the day, pit crews are who help win races. You can do as much as you can while you're in first, and dominate the race like we saw with William Byron. But if you come down pit road and lose 2-3 spots because of a slower stop, that's endgame. That happens. And I think we've seen that a lot. I think a driver, for example, I know we'll touch on Bubba Wallace's pit crew was one of the worst these past couple of years. Now they're ranked number 1, as they said in the rankings today. And then you've seen his improvement this year as well. But going back to Denny Hamlin, I think a lot of people will say he stole one because it's Denny Hamlin, just because. But it's hard to say he stole it, because I hate to say that, just because if he was up front mostly all day long. I mean, he started third. He had the pace. He only led 10 laps, though. So can you say, yeah, he stole it because William Byron led the first 243 laps, and just because he had to come down pit road is the only reason why he lost the lead? So, yeah, I guess you can say he stole that one. But, I mean, for Denny Hamlin to come out of nowhere, not winning in almost a full calendar year to winning 2 in a row. I know we didn't have Progressive on the car this week, but I remember talking to Tanner in one of our, I think it was either a chat or on one of the shows, like, I think this sponsorship has ignited a new flame under Denny Hamlin. I mean, he's two wins now, even though they weren't on the car as the primary. The Carl Edwards throwback sports clips was, but yeah. So I guess, did he steal one? Maybe. I guess you can say that. I know it's 11 against the world, right?
I will say that he stole it, right or wrong. With all due respect to that 11 team, they obviously had speed to be a top 5 car from the get-go this weekend. As Matthew pointed out, they did start third for today's race. And had it not been for what I consider a strategy blunder by going down pit road after running only 3 laps on your tires, the first 3 laps of the race felt very silly for most of those teams and set most of them back. Well, luckily for Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, his old friend, who had given him a love tap earlier in the race entering turn 3, was able to give him a bit of an olive branch with that lug nut caution that took longer than usual to come out for whatever reason. But Anyhow, I don't think Hamlin had anywhere near the strongest car, not even anywhere near the strongest top 3 cars, but clean air was king today, and he got clean air on the final restart because his pit crew, who, again, as Matthew pointed out, are an integral part of every race team and can win, or if you're the 12 team, lose you races. And today it came down to who had the fastest pit stop and a good restart. And unfortunately for Ryan Blaney and the 12 team, that was not them today. But Denny Hamlin loves to pick up where other people left off, and he scooped up the victory. And his 11 against the world campaign is just as strong as it was the week before.
Hamlin's win, like you both said, he just stole it. In the chat room, Amber say he earned it. I feel like he stole the win, but this is just a part of motorsports. You could sometimes have a win, fall on your lap. In a way, this is what happened to Denny Hamlin. He overall positioned himself to get the win, but it was a big part of pit crew, which is just part of the race. I think what really just sort of got a lot of people thinking about, like, hold on a second, is because the way it looked like it was going to be Ryan Blaney. Kyle Larson doesn't spin with 4 laps to go unless somebody else had bad luck. We're likely going to be talking about Ryan Blaney getting the win, which he had the faster car. He got to the leader of Tyler Reddick, got around him. Tyler Reddick hit the wall. The rear tires were gone. And then Kyle Larson crashed out with 4 laps to go. Goes back to the garage. But we have to remember, 4 laps into the race, he crashed. He couldn't get going, so he was towed to the garage. Larson's crash caused overtime. Unlike in the past, where if you're talking the Winston Cup era, if this had occurred, well, most likely the race is going to end under caution, or they maybe throw the red flag. You have a 2-lap shootout, but most likely it was game over. This is the first time we have this new rule where you could get towed to the garage, have as much time and come out and race again. This all, ironically, really got a lot of momentum after Ryan Blaney's Watkins Glen situation, where I believe it was a steering linkage that got it broken that first lap. They just needed to fix that part. He could race again, but he was done for the day. That sort of started the uproar. Now we have this change, and essentially you have a car over 100 plus laps, couldn't pick up another position, was not going to lose another position, impact the race outcome. Tanner, what do you think of a car multiple laps down is essentially changing the outcome of this race?
Would it have made a difference if the car was 1 lap down or 163? I think that's a question that not enough people are asking in this particular regard. But to address the question itself, I don't really see a problem with someone being out there at that big of a deficit. I understand that logging these kind of laps and continuing to tinker with the car after it's suffered such immense damage is only going to be helpful to them when they, enter a scenario in the postseason where they have to fix their car and get it right before they can go back out on track. So I don't fault the 5 team for that, and I can't fault Kyle Larson for that, for being out there. What I can fault him for is, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just like, it's almost like he is so used to being up at the front that when something like that happens in front of him, his immediate reaction is to just self-preservate, which is fine. But at the same time, a little bit self-awareness would have been a bit helpful for him in that instance. You're 163 laps off the pace, which is over half of the race distance. Your car has suffered immense damage to this point. Why are you worried about getting more damage? So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it. Don't really understand the decision to throw yourself in front of another car and slam on the brakes on the exit of a corner late in a race when you've already suffered pretty significant damage throughout the race. And I felt it was not a befitting move of a champion to bring out that final caution the way that he did. But at the same time, you can't really question the guy's resume. He's obviously won 30 plus cup races, has a championship, and is one of the better drivers in the world. But that was just a puzzling sequence of events for Larson, and it seemed beneath him for all that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's tough because it's a double-edged sword. It really is, because everyone begged for NASCAR to allow these drivers to get back just to get either a point or so on and so forth. And I can't say they did anything wrong in that sense, because why wouldn't you want to go collect data for the next race? What if somebody else spins out and all of a sudden you can get another point? Obviously, Larson lost the championship by 1 point last year, the regular season championship. And that obviously had to do with him not starting the Coke 600, because then they would have tied. He would have gotten the tiebreaker, so on and so forth. But then at the same time, you have to look at it like, why is Kyle Larson? It seems like what Tanner was saying is, when Kyle Larson isn't up front, he's just like a completely different driver. I don't know if it's self-awareness, but it's like he really is a checkers or wreckers kind of driver. And he is one of the best in the world. He really is. And it goes to show he can win almost everywhere except for a super speedway, but I digress. It's weird that when he is not up front, stuff like this seems to happen. I think he pushes the car harder than anyone, and that's why you see him wreck and DNF a lot more than anyone. But he backs it up by winning when he's not wrecking, pretty much. But yeah, for him to kind of be 163 laps down, I think, at the time or something. It was over 160 laps down. And I know that because Fox Sports kept showing on the bottom left ticker, race update, Kyle Larson in the Terry Labonte number 5, minus 100-something laps. I was like, that was a little interesting. I posted about that. And then, I mean, he came back out on track and then obviously slams on the brakes because Reddick kept hitting the wall, and then ultimately gets collected. Same exact spot, and then ends his day 37th, I believe he was. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, it sucks that ultimately he changed the outcome of the race, because this was Ryan Blaney's race to win, even though William Byron dominated. Ryan Blaney put on a very impressive show getting through the field. Looked like his father back in 06, like the scheme. I believe it was 06. I was only 4 or 5, so bear with me on that one. But yeah, so I agree a lot. Like, listen back to, if you're watching this after the live, listen back what Tanner had to say. I think he made great points there too. And I want to hear what Joe has to say, because I think he agrees with us on this one.
Overall, I feel I get it that fans want to see the cars, their drivers, especially their favorite drivers, come back, race, try to pick up 1, 2, 3 points, or in the case of Kyle Larson, just some track time, get that data, because let's be honest, we're coming here for the Southern 500. Kyle Larson gets in a crash, the data he may have learned today could help him eliminate somebody in the playoffs in the Southern 500. So I get all that. I just feel, though, there's now this issue, and it's just really being highlighted, thankfully, for just the first time, because if this was under the Winston Cup era, if this was under the era of no overtimes, race would have been either red flag with a 2-lap shootout and under caution. It wasn't that going to be that big of a drastic change now. Instead here, more laps, overtime now. It's been a while since we had overtime, and that's where I feel like you were not going to lose positions to anybody. JJ Yeley was way behind off the track. You can't get there. Josh Berry, yeah, he had crashed out. You're not going to get around him with 4 laps to go. You could be collecting data, but I mean, can you imagine if a car running multiple laps down has tape or some parts fly off and we get overtime and changes up the race complex? I think that's the big concern I have. And I also think maybe NASCAR should look into something where last 25 laps, if you're so many laps down, pull into garage. You're not going to get a position. Maybe just leave cars 1, 2, 3 laps out. That could still pick up a place here and there. But I just feel like this could open a new set of problems, and this might be the first time we've seen such a thing.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, Joe. that if you don't have any spots to really make up and spots aren't going to become available, I think it makes common sense to put that car back behind the wall at that point, because again, what purpose do you have out there at a certain point? So yeah, I don't think that's too out of the realm.
And yeah, if I can touch on that too, I think that's an interesting solution. At the same time, too, it's tough because say what happens is, I know, who was it, Noah Gragson? Someone a few weeks ago got the lucky dog like 6 times and got back on the lead lap. Was that Gragson? Somebody's got to, if you know.
Are you talking about McDowell at Atlanta when he had the power steering issue?
Yes, my apologies. Yes, it was Michael McDowell. But yeah, it's like NASCAR, you know how they wreck a lot, mainly in the Xfinity series, but that's a whole Monday talking point at this time. But you never know what could happen. And that's the tough thing is, with NASCAR's luck, they would do exactly what Joe just said and create a rule where you're a certain amount of laps down, you should park it. And then there would be he'd be the only car a lap down, and there would be 6 NASCAR overtimes. I know Ben Schneider would absolutely love that. And I know, and then all of a sudden that would happen. And then it's like, well, this guy could have been back on the lead lap. So it's one of those things. I know I keep saying double-edged sword, but I don't think there's a better way to describe the rule, the cause and effect of what would happen, because in NASCAR, how funny this sport is, something like that would happen. They'd make a rule and they would find the one time they'd have to utilize the rule very effectively, it would be something like that. So that's how I got to add to that. But I know somebody commented, I don't know, Joe, if you showed Adam or someone showed Adam's comment or yes. So William Byron too, just touch on that. Yeah. I mean, that's the most true statement on the show so far, is he was dominant, but just didn't get the win. And that's just how it went with this, unfortunately. So I do like the rule change idea. I wonder what they could do if they experiment that in ARCA or something, because ARCA, especially on a super speedway, you put that rule on ARCA, there'd be no cars left on the track, not even the leader. But okay, I'll stop joking around.
That's why I think NASCAR doesn't want to go into this realm, because like you said, Matt, I mean, I know Kyle Larson was 100 plus. There's no way we would get 100 plus overtimes.
Don't be sure.
But if you were 27 laps down, you're pulled off when there's 10 laps to go or 25 laps to go, and then the car ahead of you spins, crashes, and well, if we had been in the overtime, we still could have picked up that position 2 or 3 overtimes. I totally see that. A couple of comments in the chat room. Denver, thank you for joining us. Kyle Larson, one of the greatest of all time, top 10 in the world. Luckily to have 2 elite drivers with SVG, the other. And then Ben talk about this topic as well. I understand the idea, but there is a pride in finishing the race under power. Clint Barnes 33 in the 2009 Aaron 49. And yes, Matthew, technically unlimited amount of laps left. Spots could be available in quadruple overtime. So that's why I think probably NASCAR doesn't want to do such a rule. Hopefully we don't have situations like this occurring more frequently now that we have this new damage policy vehicle and the unlimited overtimes. But I'll throw a follow-up, keeping with Kyle Larson. There's a lot of people on social media posting about Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace because of the contact that sent Larson spinning with 4 laps ago. Well, that's essentially caused the last caution. Matt, I'm going to start with you. How do you view the incident? Because we're just seeing all sorts of people debating regarding the contact between the two.
Yeah. So what I like to think I do is view stuff logically. And I think there's a lack of logic on social media when it comes to race fans viewing this specifically, whether it's Facebook, X. I don't really use Blue Sky enough to know, but for people saying like stupid stuff like Wallace intentionally did this and it's his fault because he wanted Hamlin to win, or because it's like, what the heck is that? Like, no, literally logic, your eyes. I got 4 right now. I don't have my contacts. I got 2 glasses and I got 2 sets of eyes. Your eyes and data. That's the best thing. If you don't trust your eyes, there's analytical data that prove that Larson slammed on the brakes. He overcomped for the fact that Reddick kept hitting the wall. And Bubba's obviously a little bit faster, only 1 lap down as opposed to 160 plus laps down. So people saying that Bubba would try to help Hamlin, Bubba would try to help Reddick. No, I don't think he would. And I think he'll be the first person to tell you that he wouldn't help one of those guys out. Because why would he? He's running in the 20s. So for me, that's how I look at it, is that your eyes and logic show what happened was not intentional. It was simply a racing incident that happened. It just so happens that the 23 team is the one involved, because if it was the other 36 or 37 drivers on the grid, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now, I feel. Just because it happened between those two, obviously there's a history there. Obviously a Toyota won, the team owner of the 23 team, and the team that finished second was the 24, who happens to be teammates with the 5. And Bubba did one thing today, I'm going to leave it a point, that Larson has never done in his career, and that is finished 21st. That is a random fun fact. Larson has finished 1 through 40 except for 21st in his career. I think it was Peter Strada I was talking to way back when about like the grid. It's so funny that Larson's never finished 21st. But that's how I want to end my rant-ish point, just about how the fans are, with a fun fact, because that's what I like to do.
I definitely align mostly with what Matthew had to say, but here's my piece of it. The 5 and 23 are like magnets, unfortunately. It seems like there is some supernatural force that keeps drawing those two together. And frankly, it is really annoying to see them continue to get brought back into these same conversations. And to Matthew's point, if it had been another of the 36 cars on the grid, we would not be having this discussion if Ricky Stenhouse did this. We would not be having this discussion if Ryan Preece did this. So there's that aspect of it all. I think the drivers' history with each other definitely lends to people talking a certain way about both drivers, which is unfortunate. But if you look at the situation for what it was, we have a car that's 163 laps off the pace, beat the front end of its car completely off. They had to take it off and beat it back out, and then they sent him back out there with about 100-ish laps to go so he could go out there and log laps and make 1 or 2 passes, assuming people fell out of the race. Bubba Wallace was still running at a competitive pace, and, you know, obviously him being a lap down, it's not an ideal position for the 23 team, but it's the position they were in. And from what Auto Racing Analytics posted on Twitter of the data from Kyle Larson coming out of turn 2 of the previous lap, he didn't have any sort of a break coming out of the exit of turn 2, but you could also argue Tyler Reddick wasn't in the wall when that happened. But you could also argue that if you look at the screenshot taken from that same tweet by Auto Racing Analytics, you'll see that Tyler Reddick is like a quarter of the way down the straightaway in the wall. He isn't on the exit of turn 2 in the wall. So Kyle Larson braking as hard as he did with a car right on his bumper just doesn't make any logical sense. Like, I get that he didn't want to be involved in any further accident, but as I displayed earlier, you've already beaten your car to death. What's more damage going to do? Obviously, you don't want to ruin Reddick's race, but your race is already over. Why are you in the way? So, yeah, again, I think if Kyle Larson finds himself in this position again, and he is not often in this position, I don't expect him to replicate that mistake, but it's just another in a long line of Kyle Larson's total, like, mythological being in NASCAR. He is so cartoonishly talented. We saw that at Homestead 2 weeks ago. But he also, at times, makes some cartoonishly awful mistakes, like we saw today in both instances where he made headlines for himself, and at Homestead in 2023 when he plowed into the pit barrels trying to gain even a half-tenth of an advantage over his competition. He pushes the edge at all times, even when he really shouldn't. And this was unfortunately a situation where Kyle Larson could have used a little bit more common sense and restraint, or just awareness of the moment and where he was and what he was racing around to have made a better decision. But again, he's kind of shown us that if he makes a dumb error on the track, he doesn't often replicate it.
Gonna be interesting to see as the week progresses how more people will view what happened in the chapter in Denver. NASCAR should have 3 overtimes, max 5 laps. VO has count back system, so the leader on green lap will be declared. We might get, if it was Stenhouse, but I totally agree with your point, definitely if it weren't Priest or anybody else. Still not 100 anti-100% OT. If I had to compromise anything beyond a single attempt. OT definitely was just one of those factors where, yeah, I know if Blaney had that fast pit crew, put it up front, different story. This just seems to be what modern NASCAR is going to be like. At least we're not talking about, thankfully, like race officiating or anything like that. But anyways, let's continue on with Reddick, Blaney, who, of course, both of them looked like they were about to get wins. That didn't happen. Last year, it was Buescher that had the win slip away, missed the playoffs. Blaney has not half luck this year, it seems. If he's about to win, things go wrong. I'm just sort of to the point where it's like, wow, I can't imagine when will they finally turn the luck around, because it just makes me think you're coming to Talladega in a few weeks, other tracks you're good at. But let's be honest, Talladega, you need some good luck as well too to win. So Tanner, we are now 18 races left in the regular season, 8 done. Is it too early for a driver to say, hey, we need a win sooner rather than later?
It's far too early, unless you are in the Ty Gibbs, Brad Keselowski zone in points at this rate. Someone like Ryan Blaney, who has had speed at practically every track except for COTA, he has nothing to worry about. I know that he barely snuck into the playoffs as the lone point entry in 2022 because he didn't win any races, but that 12 team has just been lights out at several tracks of varying varieties, and it's just they just keep letting things get away from them, especially on pit road. Now, if I was Roger Penske and I had confidence in that 12 team, and they've obviously won a championship together, it might be time to start exploring a pit crew change wholesale for that team, whether that be pulling them from the 21 team who is already in the playoffs and, letting that former 12 team get some more reps on the 21 car to try to, bolster themselves, or like really having a closed room meeting and yelling at them or something, because at the end of the day, like, it's every week. And like, I really hate to, beat a dead horse, but you had the first car on pit road for 2 laps. All you needed to do was to get the tires screwed on and get him back out there because he had the fuel to make it. And you got him out 4th. That's just not acceptable. But to go back to the question at hand, I think that for someone contending for a playoff spot right now, 8 races in, you have nothing to worry about at this moment. You just need to keep doing what you're doing and keep finding speed and hope that bringing that to the racetrack will get you the playoff spot that you desire. Ryan Blaney has a penchant for making a bit of a later bid into the playoffs in terms of winning in the season. I think the earliest he's ever won in a year was probably that Talladega COVID year, and then he didn't win again. But yeah, it's frustrating, I'm sure, for some of these drivers like Reddick, who this is the best complete race that team has put together all year. It's probably disappointing for them to come out of here with no win, especially with Michael in attendance. And yeah, but I think at the end of the day, you got to wonder if you're Reddick, like how much further could I have limped this car had that caution not come out? Because he did really hit the outside wall pretty significantly, and that was probably like the 4th or 5th time. But either way, both of those guys are quite fast and have a very solid points cushion at this rate. So I wouldn't be I wouldn't be concerned if I were the 12 or 45. But again, if you're in the Gibbs Keselowski zone, you should probably be trying to get a win at all costs.
Yeah, and for me, although I agree, I'm going to kind of go on the defensive there, and I argue that I don't think it's ever too early for the drivers to say we need to get a win. And because I know you mentioned 2022 and with Ryan Blaney barely getting in, but remember Martin Truex Jr. was like 5th or 6th in points. Fourth. Oh, so he was 4th and was Blaney 6th?
Blaney was 3rd after that race.
Okay, thank you. So Martin Truex Jr. 4th in points and did not make the playoffs because he didn't get a win. So I can argue that I don't like if you look at the standings right now, you have guys like Bubba Wallace 8th, Logano 9th, Bowman 10th. I mean, Bowman, though, he's been really good. He just had a bad day today. But guys like Bubba and Logano, who you might want to think you can be as great as you want, but there's been a couple times, specifically like Bubba Wallace, he didn't win even though he was 10th or 11th, and he failed to make the playoffs last year, even though he had one of his best regular seasons that he's ever had. So I'd argue that it's really never too early to say we got to do a win. We got to get a win. And then you look down the list, even like guys like Kyle Busch, AJ Allmendinger, Chase Briscoe, Ryan Preece are like 13 through 16, not in that order. But would they be in right now? Technically, but is that too early for them to say they need a win? I don't think so. I think they can really have to go out there and get one, which it just sucks because that's the way the system really works. Unless you're like Harrison Burton last year, who had the last possible chance he got it done. But yeah, so that's how I'd say I don't think it's ever too early, but like you said, Tanner, too, it's like when you got guys like Ryan Blaney, guys who are up in the top 4 in points who haven't won yet, then yeah, maybe you could say, oh, we can relax a little. And especially because we've seen multiple drivers already win more than one race. I think if we had 7 different winners in 8 races, then you'd start like, okay, let's hit the brakes a little bit here. Maybe we need to win. But now with Bell winning 3, Hamlin obviously winning 2, I think they can kind of little sigh of relief there. But yeah, I don't think it's ever too early, but I guess we can revisit this segment when the playoffs come, because I think like we saw 4 guys last year. I believe it was like 10, like Chastain, Buescher, Bubba,
Ty
Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs. Well, I think so. Ty made it the playoffs, but those guys didn't. Like Chastain throughout. I don't believe Chastain made it. Now I'm losing.
No. Okay. Chastain didn't make it.
So those guys like Chastain, Buescher, Bubba, those guys always seem to be around each other in the standings. They didn't win in the regular season, but 2 of those guys won during the playoffs when it didn't matter. Technically. So it's like maybe those guys who haven't won in a little bit, guys who are on huge winless streaks. But then at the same point, like you said, Tanner, guys like Ty Gibbs and Brad Keselowski, who have shown they can win. Obviously, Keselowski has won a lot. Gibbs has not yet in Cup. I think that's time for them to really be like, okay, maybe we need to get this done. So.
Joe, I don't know what it is, but your voice is very, very low.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Hooray. Technology. So, yeah, in the chat room, which Penske drivers will win before the playoffs?
All 3.
It's either none or all 3. It's going to be one of the 2.
Like, obviously, Logano and Blaney are going to make it, but Cindric is obviously the one that you kind of like tilt your head at, but even he's had pace at most of these tracks, and I think had that poor timed caution not come out in the middle of stage 2, Cindric may have been up there competing for a top 10 towards the end of this race, but those are the breaks sometimes. But yeah, I think the Penske cars are showing a lot of speed, and it's just about closing these races out.
And interesting from Ben,
Atlanta, yeah.
Only career wins before June. That's going to be very interesting. Justin Allen, thank you for joining us. Personally, less of we need a win and more we need to run well enough to be in position to compete for wins every week. The way to race, you can go from 5th best car and snag a green-white checker win. I think that's a really good point. You got to be up there towards the front. I mean, we saw
That's what Hamlin did today.
What Hamlin did today, essentially. And I'll even give credit to Ty Gibbs, finally, a top 10 finish.
First one.
Just putting it together, trying to get up towards the front, get those points, get those wins. Because, yeah, a win, you could do what Denny did and get one. Now, we'll end with this one. Another debate theme has been going around online, and that is about the excitement level of the throwback weekend. This year, about half the field did not participate in the throwback weekend. For me, it seems since it's moved away from the Southern 500, which I get, you want to focus on the playoffs. It just seems like, I don't know if it's something about Fox or just the timing or what. It just seems like it has been a bit flat. Now, we see the fans are turning out to Darlington. So good fan turnout there. We see the history on display. Some great cars before they get the Darlington stripe. But Tanner, starting with you, do you believe the throwback weekend energy is running low and should be brought back for 2026? Or what should be the future of the throwback weekend?
Well, it's definitely running low amongst some of the drivers, and I kind of get that. I think that what made the initial throwback weekend such a big hit was that it was kind of unplanned. It wasn't like an edict sent down from the sport or anything like that. It was just something to do because the Southern 500 had finally moved back to its proper date at the Labor Day weekend. So with that in mind, I think that for me, the throwbacks in the Cup Series have kind of lost their way a little bit for the most part. I think many of them, as we kind of went through on our pre-race show this week, I think some of them are still very strong and still show a lot of inspiration and even ingenuity in some cases. And obviously, when you look down at the Xfinity Series, they do a great job remaining faithful with, even their smaller sponsors and stuff like that are a little bit more willing to bend their branding guidelines. But I think what's wearing everything down is like these just half effort throwbacks like Chase Elliott's, where it's like, if you look at it close enough with a picture of the other car that it's based on, you can kind of maybe see it. But because these brands are too clung to their guidelines and their brand colors, they are just a little bit too stuck in the mud and a little too rigid for this kind of a concept to really work all the time. And it's really funny for me because UniFirst was very willing last April to slap that ruby red all over the car for the 9 at Martinsville for the 40th anniversary. They had no problem doing that. But when it came to having a throwback where they needed to change their teal to a darker green, that was where they had an issue. So I did find all that interesting. I found some of the drivers' comments about this weekend pretty interesting, but I just think that this is the 11th consecutive year that we've done it. I think we may need to just take a break from it for a couple of years. And I don't think that this race is going to lose any of its impact. It's still Darlington. It's still a great race more often than not. I wouldn't say today's was great by any stretch, but yeah, it's just something that we all have kind of come to expect. And then we're kind of running out of ideas and running out of ingenuity, it seems, from the sponsorship standpoint. So maybe if we took a little bit of a break, give us a little bit of space from it, brought it back for, say, Rockingham, if it were to come back, North Wilkesboro, if it ever got a points race. If we brought it back for either of those, I think it would come back and be a big hit yet again. But yeah, right now it's kind of feeling a little stale, even though some of the throwback concepts, especially in the Xfinity Series, are still just as good as we had in year one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's tough. I think it is running its course and the energy's running low. But at the same time, I think it's great for the sport. And I'd argue against a lot of these companies marketing their products or their name branding. I think the idea, especially for an older fan base, if you really want to get your branding more notice, I think you adhere to a throwback. I really do. Like, sure, Kyle Larson's Hendrick cars scheme that he runs every single week, obviously down to Ricky Hendrick. And it's funny, the CW broadcast actually put Chase Elliott's scheme as a Ricky Hendrick throwback. I don't know if you guys caught that on Saturday, but it said, running in on Ricky Hendrick. And I was like, that's his Xfinity number 17 car. I thought that was interesting. But it's like the energy is running low. I think we can all agree on that. And it sucks when you see either half the cars or maybe only a little over half participate. It's just, it kind of sucks. I mean, I think there's so many solutions to it, to be honest with you. I think you can go a number of ways, whether it's, I know NASCAR, gosh forbid they would do this, maybe offer a little bit of an incentive. If you participate, you get a cash bonus or something like that. Or have a vote where whatever team wins the Darlington throwback gets a money bonus, something like that to actually encourage these teams. But I'd argue at the same time, too, having it this early in the season is you are not giving the designers enough time, I truly believe, because you have 7 weeks before this. They're focused on the 7 weeks before this. Sometimes you do it really early in the year, like ahead of time, but other time you got guys scrambling trying to figure out what they're going to do. If you pushed it to a later race or maybe even the Southern 500, but I would say at the All-Star race, say if you go back to Rockingham and at the Cup level, do it there. Do it at a North Wilkesboro. Darlington's great. It's historic, but maybe it is running its course there. But I think one thing that keeps the energy up is bringing back a lot of these veteran guys that you see, whether it was Carl Edwards, obviously, earlier, and then you had Mike Skinner. You had guys like Ron Hornaday mentioned his Team Hornaday development program, guys talking about their love and stuff for the sport and still being able to maybe not see their exact schemes out there, but at the same time just saying, oh, it's pretty cool, It's like there's a lot of them maybe aren't in the public eye as much with NASCAR because it's a totally different sport than it was when they were behind the wheel. But to see them go out there, whether it's mandatory for the Hall of Fame, I can't comment on that. But at the same time, just to bring that energy, bring those veterans back there to show that this is actually, it could be a great thing from a marketing standpoint. And I think social media, NASCAR social media has really picked up their pace, what they've been able to do. The graphics look amazing. The videos, editing, out of this world. And you can do a lot of marketing campaign with Darlington or with the throwback. I argue too that I don't think they give the designers enough time and the sponsors enough time to figure out, hey, instead of our generic scheme, we run 18 races out of the year, we're going to completely mix it up. I wouldn't say they run out of ideas either. I think you could technically run a throwback for anything. The amount of drivers that have raced in the NASCAR, any 3 series, the amount of won in any 3 series, I think there's unlimited opportunities. And I know it's been 11 years. We've seen the same schemes like the Sterling Marlin, what was on Alfredo's car. Technically, you could argue that was Jamie McMurray. But, still, it's like that's the best, one of the best looking schemes out there. I know Landon Castle ran it back in 2019, I believe it was. I don't know if a Quinn Houff ran it too, the double zero, one of those two guys, but it's like they look great, and the branding because of whatever was on that car, just because it looked like an old car someone might have liked 20 years ago. But yeah, that's my end for the point. I think it's running low. They got to do something, whether it's offer an incentive. I don't think making it mandatory is ethical unless you do it at an all-star race where not everyone's really going to be in there, or maybe the Clash, just something to get the fans excited.
I would say overall, it seems like if the excitement's at the track, which you can't really feel on the TV, great. But I feel the presentation, NBC, when they had the Certified 500, you saw the ads. It's throwback weekend, the vintage NBC ads. They brought back then Ken Squire, Jared. I really felt like they made a big event where, I don't know, it's just because maybe I don't watch Fox as much or what, but I just don't get that sense like we're seeing this big of a buildup. I overall think, the other thing too, for me at least, still having the car number so far forward, hard to make it work on a lot of the throwback schemes. I would love to see if the RTA and NASCAR's like, this is the one race, the car numbers could be moved to the door. I think that would really just help some of these cars look good again, because Kyle Larson's car, the last 2 years with that number 5, he seemed to make that work, but there's those other paint schemes where it's like just doesn't seem to work. But overall, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the chat room. Denver says Supercar Solari's Indigenous weekend with all cool Indigenous paint scheme, and I think NASCAR should celebrate Black History Month to have them recognize them for what they meant to America. That could be a cool other idea as well too. Throwback ran its course years ago. We don't even have the proper number placement anymore. Hate to say it, but I think it's time to move on. And then of all the road courses, who could sneak a playoff spot? I think Shane Van Gisbergen is top of that list. I mean, that's who I'm looking at. It's a lot of stuff. And, well, since we're talking about playoffs, who can sneak a win, let's throw back to just this race. Earlier, it looked like Gibbs were just not going to have a good day at all. Now, thankfully, Denny Hamlin got that win. You had Christopher Bell in the top 10, Ty Gibbs in the top 10. They needed a good run, Matt. Despite them getting that win, top 10 finish, 3 out of 4 cars. But seeing that early pace, does Gibbs have concern about whether they are at the pace in Darlington since we're coming back in the playoffs later on for the Summer 500?
Yeah, I just think you got to just take this one step at a time if you're Gibbs, just because they've done something historic, according to an X post by Daniel Cespedes. Gibbs has won 5 of the first 8 races, which is only the 4th time in NASCAR modern history that this has been accomplished by any team, and it is actually the 2nd time Joe Gibbs has done this specifically. But you have like Bell and Hamlin are really far ahead, and then you have Briscoe, he's in the middle, and then Ty Gibbs is absolutely nowhere in the same stratosphere. But it's interesting because this is Ty Gibbs' first top 10 since Kansas last year, race 30. So they did, was a 36 regular season, and then you had 8 races to start this year. That's a long time for Ty Gibbs, who is an Xfinity champion, who I believe will be a Cup champion someday. He's only 22. To go without a top 10, especially in the best Toyota equipment and arguably top 3 equipment in the entire sport. So for Ty Gibbs, is there concerns about the pace? I mean, yeah, you can say that. But at the same time, all the Gibbs guys, I mean, you could say Bell and Briscoe were out of it for some reason, and then then Bell came back. I don't know what happened to Briscoe, but he did not. Once he started 4th, he just went backwards the whole race. But for them, I guess you can be concerned about the pace, but at the same time, I told you guys this before, if you have to eat an elephant, I think that's what the Gibbs family has to do here. Not a literal elephant, but just let me get to the point. Is if you eat an elephant, you got to take it one bite at a time. Because if you look at the whole elephant, that's too much. And the whole elephant is like the struggles with pace. Ty Gibbs being like 30-something in points or wherever the heck he is. I know he's in the 20s or something. But for him to be that far back, that's too big of the elephant. If you want to take it one bite at a time, you're like, Ty Gibbs had the pace to get stage points finally, to run up in the top 10 finally. That's the first bite. The next bite is go to Bristol, where I think he was truly a contender last year. And then the whole tire debacle. I think he was up in the top 3 most of the race. And I know stuff happened with the Gibbs team. It's like, that's the next bite. But for now, you got to just take it one step at a time, one bite at a time. And I think to be in the top 10 for Gibbs, to have 3 of your cars in the top 10 in general, including 2 on the podium, I think they can be concerned, but sometimes stuff just falls right into your lap and you just got to take it and move on to Bristol.
I think for the 54 team, this was definitely a step in the right direction because they started out the race back there with the 19 and the 20, and it didn't look too great. But as the day wore on, I think they were part of that group that stayed out and got that second stage caution and kind of got that preferable track position. That kind of helped reinvigorate their race and probably their season, if you want to kind of look at it in a macro sense. But yeah, I think that for them, you kind of have to take this as a very big, swing in the positive direction. I think that Chris Gabehart's ability to kind of change everything at Joe Gibbs Racing is really starting to take shape. He clearly produced 4 fast qualifying race cars. And unfortunately, it seemed that 2 of them fell off the pace pretty early for whatever reason. But one of them was able to bounce back. Again, favorable caution was able to kind of help them get back up there. But at the end of the day, those guys had to drive the cars and put them in position to get those good finishes. Now, as for Briscoe, I was very disappointed. They were my 36 for 36 pick in NASCAR Fantasy, and I thought I had it made today because he clearly was the most recent winner of this rate or of this track, having won at the Southern 500 with SHR in the fall. And given that he's coming into a JGR where, again, Gabe Hart is comp director, and then James Small, who has engineered cars that have won or contended for wins at Darlington with Martin Truex Jr., I thought that was a slam dunk fantasy pick. And like Matthew said, they started 4th and just anchored the whole race. It seemed like it was kind of odd, to be completely frank, but at the end of the day, I think having 3 out of your 4 cars is better than 2 out of your 4, which is kind of what they've had for much of the season. So, you've got to kind of take this as a step in the right direction for that team, but you would prefer all 4 of them be contending for the win rather than just 2 or just 3. So I definitely think that 19 team still has some work to put in to get the results that they want. I think James Small needs to maybe work a little harder at making his setups and working on his communication with Chase, because it just seems like the problems I saw with him and Martin and their relationship towards the end are starting to weasel their way back in with a new driver. And it's starting to make me wonder if James Small's even cut out to continue being in the Cup Series as a crew chief, if he can't keep up with the racetrack and make the adjustments necessary to make the car continue to go fast.
Yeah. And just to add to Tanner's point, as a joke about the fantasy and the 36 for 36. Last week I had 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I was absolutely cooking. I had Ryan Preece for my 36 of 36. This week I had Carson Hocevar in the 36 for 36. Oh. So yeah, it's like, what the heck, right? But that's all I wanted to add to that. But yeah, that's sometimes you do good and sometimes life kicks you right back down.
Motorsports, sometimes it's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, and I feel in motorsports that is just so true, because at the end of the day, it's just one person, one driver or rider behind the wheel that could change the outcome. And well, in the case of today, it was the pit crew, a team of tire changers, Jackman, all made the difference. I gotta say, before we switch over to F1, big kudos to the Jackman of the 11 car in that unique way. He's just throwing that jack around the corner. Does make me think though, like, don't take out your teammate, but if that was the winning split second, my goodness, came in big. So overall, big shout out to the pit crew for getting the job done.
It was nice to see them make that reference to Junior Johnson on the broadcast, because he was also a very, we'll say, a crafty Jackman on that 11 car back in the day.
He definitely was. Let's switch over to F1. We'll bring Kobe back, where pit stops, well, we'll be talking a little bit about one driver pit stop that got a little crazy, but this race overall, the hype was something else, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of hype and not much bite from this one. I know everyone on the Grid Live After Dark show were really excited, and I have to say, it was so nice seeing everyone on that show last night. Thought you all did an incredible job, getting ready for the Japanese Grand Prix, and so it wasn't all for naught. But in the end, most of the top 10 finished where they started, as the field battled dirty air, which made passing extremely difficult. The only exception was Lewis Hamilton, who got around Isaac Hadjar for position. And throughout the race, drivers had to deal with the cooler temperatures, the hardest tire set from C1 to C3, and a repaved track. Joe, could F1 have gone with a softer tire compound for the weekend? I think you're muted again.
I didn't say anything yet. I was thinking. Overall, I feel this is something I kept thinking, because it's easy for us to say, oh, they got gone with a softer tire compounds instead of the C1 to C3, C2 to C5, or C3 to C6. I mean, you could always make those arguments, but then I think of what happened in Baku a couple years ago, where you had Max Verstappen, Lance Stroll have a tire failure, and then everybody got on Pirelli about, oh, the tires were too soft for this track. If you had a softer tire, yeah, you could have seen tire wear, maybe a little tire management, but I think everyone will still go with the hard, medium tires like they did in the pit stops here in the race today. Could tire wear have been a little bit of a bigger role for tire management? Maybe. But it's just so hard to tell. And I mean, at the end of the day, the tracks have to get repaved. I just think it was just one of those deals where if you had a situation where it was probably hot and sunny like we had the first few days, maybe you would see a little bit more. But with these cooler conditions, I mean, we see the same kind of effect when a NASCAR track has a repave where everyone has that grip, and it just, you put it in the hard tires, and that's the kind of show you get. So it's just so hard to say. I mean, it could have helped, but you just never know. And I would assume Pirelli, they probably saw this was the best bet, because the last thing you want is a repeat of Baku 2 years ago and just have 2 high-profile crashes because the tires failed.
Yeah, I do think it's a little hard for anybody to be like too hard on Pirelli for their tire compounds this weekend. With a repaved track, you do not have any idea what that is going to produce until you get to the track, unless you do some sort of a tire test or something beforehand, which unless there was one that I missed, I don't believe they had. So yeah, I think given Japan's relative proximity to Europe, where most of the teams are stationed, it'd be pretty difficult to get them out there for just this random test session. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think that in retrospect and hindsight, we can definitely look at it and say it'd be great if they had a softer tire or 3 softer tire sets of different compounds. But at the end of the day, you kind of just have to trust your gut, and sometimes your gut's wrong, but you'd rather be safe than sorry, kind of like Joe was illustrating. And I believe that Baku race you're referring to was back in 21 when Lewis, they did basically like a green-white checker with Checo on the pole, and Lewis was on outside pole, and then he did his brakes too much and flew through the first corner. So yeah, I think that it's better to be safe than sorry with tire compounds. Obviously, next year, I'm sure they'll be a little bit more attuned to what that track is going to do and kind of how it's going to take rubber and things like that. And the weather this weekend was also very difficult to tack down. You had it be so dry throughout most of the weekend that any sort of contact with the grass or any sort of like, even if you looked at the grass funny, it would set itself on fire, or it was raining. So yeah, it was just a perfect storm of not great circumstances for Pirelli to really hammer home a proper tire compound, and we kind of just got the race that we got. And it's really unfortunate that Suzuka kind of put on a bit of a dud when it is genuinely one of my favorite tracks on the entire planet.
Yeah, and I believe that Baku race that you mentioned, that was the race that ended up costing Lewis Hamilton the championship at the end of the day, because when he had that incident, wasn't able to get up into the points. And if he had scored points that day, he would have been the world champion instead of the debacle that went down in Abu Dhabi at the end of that year. But yeah, it's unfortunate the way things happened at the Japanese Grand Prix, because we all know Suzuka is, it's not just one of the best racetracks in Japan. It's one of the best racetracks in the world. And this track has put on some excellent shows before. And like you're saying, Tanner, just a perfect storm here, why things didn't necessarily go as well. And I'm sure, as the asphalt gets some age on it, and Pirelli looks back at its tire data, I'm pretty sure that Suzuka is going to produce some great racing. Once again, it was just one of those situations where you had the cooler temperatures, the harder tire compound. And, typically when you see a repave, on a racetrack for the first race weekend there, it's not typically the best show. You usually need to let the asphalt get a little age on it before you actually see a lot more better racing. So we'll have to hope that next time when we come back to Suzuka, that the racing product will be a lot better. And next we're going to look at the race winner, Max Verstappen, who dominated the race, got the win in Japan, but many are pointing fingers at McLaren for a lack of papaya rules. Verstappen pulled ahead of Lando Norris with Oscar Piastri right behind Norris, and many were wondering if a swap would allow Piastri a chance to take the fight to Verstappen. Norris ended up keeping second place with Piastri in third, but Norris still leads the driver standings by 1 point over Verstappen. So here's my question for you guys. Tanner, did McLaren make a mistake by not swapping Norris and Piastri?
Yes, and they should have done it way earlier in the race. I feel like it seemed pretty apparent to anybody with eyeballs that Oscar Piastri had the better car yesterday, or I guess it counts as today, but you get what I mean. I think that Oscar, every time that he got even a light bit behind Lando, he was always able to pick it right back up within about 2 or 3 laps and get back into DRS range. Meanwhile, Lando was, as his strategist put it, he was running his pace, and they refused to make any sort of move past that because they thought that, I guess, Max was wearing his tires out up at the front, which clearly wasn't happening. So, yeah, I think in hindsight, it's easy to say that, oh, yeah, well, they totally should have done it. But I think everybody and their mother that wasn't a Red Bull fan was like, you need to swap them at some point, especially when you get to the phase of the race where Charles Leclerc had completely fallen off the pack. He was nowhere to be found. So the worst that was going to happen to Lando was he was going to finish third. Oh, dearie me. So, yeah, I feel like if McLaren wanted to win rather than trying to reinforce this like hierarchy in their team, which clearly favors Lando, and as we've discussed many times here, I don't think that should be the case. It looks really messy, and I think that I don't know if Piastri was going to be able to completely run down Verstappen because that car with clean air seemed to be pretty unbeatable, but we'll never know now because we had to let Lando let his buddy drive into the distance while looking at his rear wing. So, yeah, it's unfortunate for McLaren, but they have no one but themselves to look at.
Yeah, it's tough because I think what we're going to see from McLaren, especially if they really have this sort of dominance that we've kind of seen, is I think we're going to see like a Lewis and Nico type situation where they're so close and it's like they're battling and they're going to end up, I guess, for lack of a better term, screwing each other over because they're just something's going to happen. They might connect. I mean, I get papaya rules and all that stuff we heard last year and we heard this year, but it's like Oscar, he might not have had the pace in practice. And he might not have had the pace to catch up to Lando in qualifying. But it was blatantly obvious what was going on in the race and that Oscar would have gotten around Lando, and I think Lando would have fallen back a lot. And if it wasn't for his teammate not sandbagging behind him to not go around him, I just think it was also hard to pass, though, like you said earlier, like with the dirty air and stuff. I think that really did apply here. But, it's just like you're going to see a battle between Lando and Oscar, I feel. But quietly, if Max Verstappen continues to bring a 4th or 5th best car on the grid up to the front and continue to be up front on the podium and win races, then he might take advantage of it, of those two battling one another. And it's hard with the hierarchy. Clearly, they do favor Lando. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't you? I think because Lando's been with the team so long. Oscar's talent, I feel he was good, but I think he kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone would expect this early on in his career that he would be contending for the world championship. I think it's just because of the lack of pace McLaren had the previous couple of years. But yeah, I think it was a mistake. I really do, for not swapping them. And I'm not going to say it could get them towards the end of the season, but I think those two are really going to start battling. And I think this was a prime example of Oscar probably in the back of his head. Like, well, how am I going to even have a chance if I'm the faster car and they're not going to let me pass? I think they got to take some notes about Lewis, Hamilton, and Valtteri Bottas, where Valtteri would get the heck out of the way, but Lewis would give the place back if Lewis couldn't do what the team wanted him to do. And I think McLaren might have to take some notes on that. I don't think they can take the notes on Nico and Lewis, because then obviously they're going to fall way back. But yeah, that's how I just feel about that one.
Yeah. And before we move on, let's catch up on the chat room. So if we can display, thank you. And Denver said it looks like Max versus Lando versus Oscar world title fight, and Yuki still useless even as an exposed better car. We'll talk about Yuki a little bit later in the show. You said Danny Ricciardo should come back to do a caretaker role until Red Bull get a better driver. Considering how Red Bull treated him at the end of last year, if I'm Danny Rick, why would I want to come back to Red Bull? Honestly, I would be surprised if Danny Ricciardo came back in any way to Red Bull, but who knows? Maybe he needs some cashing, and Red Bull can pay him to come back. So hey, I'm sure a lot of us would do something we didn't really want to do for cash, in certain circumstances though. And Denver also says, yeah, you see sometime this year Oscar going to Lando saying to screw you, Lando. Yeah, it seems like that these two could potentially be on a collision course later on in the season. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, to the levels of Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. But right now, McLaren seems to have a really hard time managing their drivers. I know it's obvious that the team seems to favor Lando over Oscar Piastri, but they really have like two number one drivers on their hands. And so that makes it very, very difficult. And I will say that I'm not a fan of team orders at all. But if you're thinking about this strictly from a business perspective, I didn't have the data in front of me. Obviously, none of us did. I didn't have the lap times in front of me either. But based on the eye test, it seemed like Oscar Piastri was a lot faster than Lando Norris during that portion of the race when Piastri was just closing up. So I do think that McLaren made a mistake strictly from a business point of view. I feel like if it seems like Oscar Piastri had the pace, they should have just let him go to see if he could catch Max. But then again, there's no telling if Oscar would have been able to catch him for position, because given the dirty air, how strong it was, you needed to be out front in that clean air. Max had the clean air, so maybe Oscar gets closer, but maybe he doesn't pull off the pass because, you just get trapped in that bubble of air and you just get stuck. And there's really nothing you can do unless the guy ahead makes a mistake. So I feel like they should have at least attempted to have Piastri, see if he can chase down Max. And if not, like you were saying, Matthew, like they did with Lewis and Valtteri Bottas, if he wasn't able to do it, just swap him back and let Lando, have his second place finish. And it's going to be interesting to see how McLaren's going to manage their drivers moving forward. It can be a good problem to have, or it can be a really bad problem. But what happened in Japan, I feel like it was potentially a missed opportunity here to do a little bit more than what they were able to do. And the most controversial and only notable moment of the race occurred when Verstappen and Norris entered the pits together. Red Bull's crew was a little slow on its stop, as McLaren perfectly executed a great pit stop as Norris exited side by side with Verstappen. Norris went off into the grass at pit exit as Verstappen pulled ahead, but race control decided not to take any action on this incident. And over the radio, both drivers disagreed on who was at fault. Norris said Verstappen forced him off the track, while Verstappen said that Norris essentially drove himself into the grass. Joe, start with you on this one. Which driver deserves more blame for this incident?
This was definitely hard racing when it came to the incident occurring. I mean, Max is known he is not going to give you space or open it if he doesn't have to. So in a way, I feel like, Lando should have known better than, hey, Max is not going to, concede at all. He's going to put you in a bad spot. And that's what I think at the end happened. I was a bit surprised seeing that, race control didn't do anything, just let them race. But at the end of the day, I just feel like Max was just ahead of Lando. Lando had to concede it because there's just no way Verstappen's going to slow down. He's Max Verstappen. He's not going to do that regardless of who you are.
Yeah, there was room for two cars. I felt that Max is definitely more at fault in this scenario. And I say that because, again, he is the car ahead and he is leaving pit road. And there is plenty of room to his left that he could have used to have given Lando some room. But he obviously doesn't want to do that, right? Letting your competition get beside you at a pit road and get the inside going into turn one is not exactly an appetizing thought for somebody that's trying to win a race. At the same time, I felt what he did was a little bit too much. And I don't think it could have risen up to the level of a time penalty because it was such a minor thing, but like he clearly just ran Lando completely off the track. And I don't think it's an unsafe release necessarily because the person that was releasing was Lando. So it's not one of those things where I felt like any penalty in the F1 rulebook that I'm aware of could have really been applied to the situation. I do lean towards what Joe said, that it's more so hard racing, but at the same time, like you cannot keep, as the FIA, you cannot keep indulging Max Verstappen's antics like this. He keeps getting away with this kind of stuff, and frankly, as a viewer, it's getting really, really annoying. He's been doing these Bush League tactics for years and has faced none of the repercussions for them. And frankly, I think this could have been a moment where maybe you, as the FIA sanctioning body, you put your foot down a little bit and say, all right, look, you are a 4-time world drivers champion. You do not need to resort to these cheap tricks. So let's just race straight up. And personally, as a viewer, I would prefer if they just got to race straight up after that on that pit release. And frankly, I didn't feel like Lando was given that opportunity, and ultimately I think it completely altered the outcome of the race based on just a small patch of grass. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. I didn't think it was excessively, dirty, but again, it's just another notch on Max Verstappen's bedpost. He keeps doing this kind of stuff. It's pretty much routine at this point, and I would personally like to see them put a stop to it and start levying some form of punishment against him, but it doesn't seem like they're going to do that. So, Lando, if I had to give you any advice for the next time that this might happen, because I'm sure it will, just slap him in the side pod or blow his tire out, because that's what they're trying to tell you to do. He's not going to give you room, make room.
Yeah, and it's like I can agree with that, but I can also disagree in the sense that, I mean, Max Verstappen, sure, was it kind of unethical to block, but at the same time, he just stayed straight, and it's like, what else? I like, to be honest with you, like, let's be honest with each other. If that was Lando Norris, he would have done the same dang thing, because that's how they drive against each other. Was it Austria last year when they wrecked each other pretty much, and George got that win? I think that was Austria. It's just, that's going to happen between these two. And I know if you flip the reverse the roles, it's that's the same exact thing is going to happen. And obviously, I think Max knew what was going to happen there. And I think Lando should have known, too, at the same time that Max was going to do that. Because if you're Lando, you would have done the same exact thing with what just happened there. So it's like, did Max do anything wrong in the rulebook sense? No, not really. But at the same time, do you want that to happen because it's in the rules and now the other 19 drivers on the grid saw that can be done and get away with it? It's like, yeah, so I guess we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I guess they're both to blame in the sense not knowing how each other race each other, because I feel like they're going to be battling like this a lot, and they did towards the end of the year last year when McLaren found more pace. Obviously, I know Max made that move that kind of caused everything that happened last year. So Tanner makes a point where Max is the one driver. He's so dang good. He reminds me, I know the Larson comparisons, so good, but sometimes they drive a little too aggressively and mistakes get caused, and it inevitably either ruins them or ruins another driver around them. So I guess we'll see the next time these two are up front, because dang well it's going to happen once again.
Yeah. In the way I saw this situation, I didn't really say that this was more Max's fault or this was more Lando's fault. I saw this situation in a way where I feel like both drivers could have done a little bit better in the moment. I guess Max could have been a little bit more courteous, just move slightly over to the left to try to give Lando some more room. But who am I kidding? You have clean air. Like, why would you want to give up clean air? So I do understand why Max, would stay where he was on the racetrack. And from Lando's perspective, I think Lando could have been a little bit smarter in that moment, because I understand, you want to try to beat him out in your side by side, and given the tight squeeze there at the exit of pit lane, I feel like, Lando could have just backed off and hoped to get Max, during the next DRS zone. But like I was saying earlier about dirty air, there's no telling whether or not you could even do that, even with DRS, since passing was so extremely challenging throughout this race. I just feel like both drivers could have, done a little bit better in this moment. And Lando's lucky he saved the car in the grass there. Can you imagine the dramatic scene if Lando Norris goes in the grass right there, side by side Max Verstappen, and just turns left and crashes out both of them, that would have been an absolute disaster for both Red Bull and McLaren. So we're lucky we didn't get an incident like that. But moving forward, it's going to be interesting to watch how Max Verstappen and Lando Norris race each other in future Grand Prix races. And while Verstappen ran at the front, his new teammate Yuki Tsunoda was in the midfield, ended up coming home in 12th place in his home Japanese Grand Prix. And given how hard it was to overtake this weekend, and Tsunoda fell into advance out of Q2, pretty much ended any chance he had to make lots of progress in the race. Like Liam Lawson did in Melbourne and Shanghai, Tsunoda didn't score any points. Matthew, how would you grade Tsunoda's Red Bull debut weekend as a whole when you look at practice, qualifying, and then the race?
It's like C minus, D plus, honestly. And it sucks because it's like you throw him into this position I think they should have done it at the start of the year, and then you're throwing him in a week or two before the race goes off. I know it's his home Grand Prix or whatever, so a lot of excitement. But, I mean, he was 6th in practice, the first one. We're like, yeah, okay, let's go, Yuki. Show the haters. And then he was 18th. You're like, okay, Yuki, not sure what you're doing here. Then he was 9th, and it's like, okay, a little bit better, not as better as you should. And then he qualifies, doesn't even get out of Q2, and you're like, oh, okay, this is how it's going to be, isn't it? And then he finishes 12th, no points. And it's like, what the heck? Like, is this – I think that viral moment for, I know, the Drives to Survive fans, when Toto Wolff was telling Red Bull and Christian Horner that your car sucks, Checo's complaining about it. I think we're showing that Max Verstappen is actually driving a really crappy car, and he's just so damn good at what he does that everyone else who's in that second seat is just horrific. Because I don't know, you could put Ricardo in there, like one of the commenters mentioned. You could bring back Sebastian Vettel in his prime. I don't think anyone – put Valtteri Bottas in the damn car. I don't think anyone's going to be doing half as good as Max Verstappen. Obviously, Yuki does not score any points. And now, I mean, you look at the standings here too, right? There's some notable guys. You have Ollie Behrman, Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon, the Haas's, right? Lance Stroll and Isaac Hadjar, who is still in the other Red Bull car. They all have something in common, and they are ahead of both drivers who have been in the Red Bull seat, Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. That says a lot about that second seat. I don't know if it's cursed or something, but I think the car is actually just really 4th or 5th best, and Max is just so dang good that you can't tell. But if you put Liam Lawson and Yuki and throw Max back in the RB, I still think we'd have the same results. I think Max might be 6th or 7th on pace, but I think the other guys would still be way in the back. I just think the car is way too difficult for these guys to drive. I just think Max is one of those guys who can see air move before it happens. He's got that it factor. I think guys like Lewis Hamilton had, guys like in NASCAR. You have guys like Dale Earnhardt, you guys like Richard Petty. Those guys had an it factor. I think Max has it, but I don't think any other Red Bull driver since maybe Sebastian Vettel has had that same factor, and it shows by terrible results in the constructor standings. So sorry for that long rant, but the C plus, C minus maybe is the best I'd give Yuki. I think we expected more out of him because he's been waiting so long, and it just didn't happen, especially at his home Grand Prix. I'm sure he'll score points, but I don't know. Are they going to – it's becoming a meme now. They asked Isaac, well, would you take the opportunity? Was he supposed to say no? Like, come on, guys. Like, I know we're all in media. Why are you asking questions like that to Isaac Hadjar? So that's how I feel. Sorry for the rant. I will be quiet now and let Tanner take over this question.
So I think that it would behoove many people, including everybody within Red Bull's camp, to look at the positives of this race weekend for Yuki Tsunoda. So, yes, he did start 14th. Not great, but that is still better than anything Liam Lawson has done in that car to this point. That's a plus. Second plus, he passed 2 cars, which in a race where passing was profoundly difficult, I'd say that's a plus. Him not getting points, yeah, it's a negative. But again, we discussed in the very first question of this segment that there was only one pass amongst the cars and the points all race, and it was Lewis Hamilton passing Isaac Hadjar. So, again, you've got to look at the context of the race that we had rather than what a regular GP looks like. So, with all of that in mind, I'm giving Yuki Tsunoda a B-. I think that though he didn't have the weekend I'm sure he wanted, I think that being able to pass in this Red Bull 21 car is extremely impressive because Max really hasn't done much of that himself to this point. So him being able to actually make passes on other drivers rather than being 2 seconds off the pace of his teammate is an infinite upgrade over Lawson, which again, I'm really trying hard not to, beat Lawson up too much. I think he was put in an unfair position, but at the end of the day, that's who we have him to compare to. Now, with that in mind, I think that the Red Bull is not a good car. And I think that the reason it's not a good car is because they cater too much to Max Verstappen. The reason this car is bad is because of Max Verstappen and his endless desire for perfection in the car. And he likes a car that swings really hard with the front as soon as he needs to swing it, and the rear kind of, fishtails along with it. He likes a loose race car for those in the NASCAR world. And when you have a car like that, you need a driver that fits the driving style for it. And obviously Max very clearly does. But in the world of Formula One, a really big issue is passing. And it has been like that for really as long as I can remember. And we have a car that they've built that if it gets into dirty air at all, it's not worth anything. And it kind of Max Verstappen's performance last night kind of reminded me a lot of what William Byron did today in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington. As soon as William Byron got into any form of turbulent air, his car sandbagged tremendously. You would see his 4 or 5 second gap go down to 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second in like 7 laps. It was completely absurd. And I think had Max Verstappen run into like lap traffic or got a really bad beat on a pit stop and got behind somebody, he wasn't going to go anywhere. And I think that Yuki being able to actually create overtakes with this car actually shows a lot of growth for the car itself and can kind of show Max like maybe some spots where he can improve with it when he's in traffic, because with all due respect, he was never going to catch Lando in Australia, and he wasn't really making any ground up when he was in China either. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's really unfortunate for Yuki that he didn't get the points and the finish that he wanted. But I think if you look at it contextually, he didn't have a bad race. It was just he had a poor starting spot and nobody else could pass, but he passed twice. And I think that says something. And it's unfortunate that that's going to get lost in the shuffle because Hadjar had a better qualifying session and thus a better finish. So yeah, again, it's an unfortunate situation, but I think that the RB21 is a very, very imperfect car that will, for Yuki's sake, hopefully get better as time goes on with his input. But right now, I feel like if Max Verstappen had started third and not been able to take the lead off the grid, then he probably does not win that race or lead a single lap. I think he finishes like 6th or 7th.
Yeah, it was an interesting debut weekend for Yuki Tsunoda at Red Bull. After free practice 1, he wasn't that far off Max, and we're like, okay, maybe he was the right driver to be Max Verstappen's teammate, because that was extremely encouraging. Then FP2, I kind of, dismissed what happened there because, we had multiple stoppages during that session, so you didn't really have many opportunities to get a clean lap. So although he was down the charts on that one, didn't really look too much into that. FP3, a little bit better, but yeah, nothing that, you want to hang your hat on. And then qualifying, we know what happened there. Hey, at least he got out of Q1. Liam Lawson can't say that in his 2-race stint with Red Bull. So getting out of Q1 was a win, a small victory within itself. And obviously, if you're driving a Red Bull car, you want to get into Q3. Unfortunately, Yuki wasn't able to do that. And if you perfectly said, Tanner, it was very hard to pass out there. So Yuki should at least be glad that he moved forward instead of, regressing throughout the day and moving backwards. So that's a small victory as well. But kind of like I said with Liam Lawson, I'm going to say the same thing with Yuki Tsunoda. Red Bull, please give him time in this car. Please give him, a handful of races at the very least before you make another driver swap. And we, have the triple header, coming up. Just finished Japan, then we're gonna go to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Hopefully, Yuki will do better at Bahrain this coming weekend, and then Saudi Arabia after that. And if Yuki doesn't score points, in all three of these races, I hope Red Bull doesn't be like, yep, we're gonna move him back to Racing Bulls, and we're gonna move up Isaac Hadjar and give him a go, because at that point it just gets very cartoonish and absolutely silly if we're gonna be playing musical chairs all season long in that second Red Bull car. I think they need to be in it for the long haul, at least the rest of the season with Yuki, just to give him an opportunity to learn the car. And like you're saying, Tanner, I don't think he had a terribly bad race, but given all things considered, because if he had qualified in the top 10, I'm pretty sure he would finish in the points, given how clean of a race he ran during the Japanese Grand Prix. But since he was stuck back there was only so much that he could do, since basically where they qualified is where they finished for the most part. So there wasn't really much Yuki Tsunoda could do. But the one person that I'm watching is Helmut Marko. And I saw the comments he made about Yuki on motorsport.com. He was asked by them, like, what do you think of Yuki's debut race? And so, to my surprise, he actually said it was fine. He said he said minus the mistake in qualifying, where he didn't get a good lap in Q2. He said he thought it was fine. So I guess, that's a good thing that Helmut Marko is, saying that, instead of, being like, oh, it was horrible. We expect more from him. But I hopefully Red Bull will be more understanding that, you need to give your driver time to get up to speed with the car. If Red Bull does make a, unprecedented second driver change in the middle of the season, at least give Yuki till the summer break, at least give him that long before you decide to put Isaac Hadjar or whoever knows in that second car. Yeah, I think you just need to give these drivers time, to see what they can do in the car. But then again, they made a Max Verstappen car, not an actual car that both drivers can actually handle. So it's going to be very hard to find someone who can drive that car exactly like Max Verstappen. So that's another thing we'll be following throughout the season, see if Yuki Tsunoda can live up, to the standard of, being a Red Bull F1 driver and trying to be Max Verstappen teammates, which seems to be one of the most difficult jobs in all of motorsports. And as I said, next race weekend, Bahrain Grand Prix, next Sunday, April 13th. We'll preview the race Saturday at noon Eastern, including IndyCar at Long Beach. The NTT IndyCar Series did not race this weekend, but after a few weeks off, they'll be back in California. But an IndyCar driver is leading week 1 of the grid ranking.
First Sunday of April's final here, week 1 of the grid ranking. For the first time, Alex Palou leads the grid ranking. He becomes the 5th IndyCar driver to lead the grid ranking. He has a big lead because he has won the first 2 races, 2 out of 2, picked up positions on each race. So he'll be going for making it 3 out of 3 at Long Beach. So Kobe, starting with you, do you believe Alex Palou has the potential of making it 3 in a row at Long Beach?
I say if he does, I guess he can change his name to Alex Verstappen, right? Because it's been, it's been so, incredible to watch what this number 10 team has done. It just not just the last few years, but to start off this season on a hot streak, picking up right where they left off last year. I think that entering the race weekend, Alex Palou will definitely be one of the favorites to go out there and win. But at the end of the day, like any racing series, I think it's going to come down to qualify and see where he qualifies. If he has an uncharacteristically, poor qualifying session that starts mid-pack, maybe not. But if he can, at least make the Firestone Fast 6 start in the top 6, top 10, I think anything is possible with that number 10 team, because we've seen even in races when he didn't dominate, he ended up finding a way to win the race. Anyways, kind of like we see with his teammate Scott Dixon from time to time and throughout his racing career. But yeah, it's no surprise to see Alex Palou is, leading week 1 of the grid ranking here after 2 strong race weekends in St. Pete and the Thermal Club. I expect another strong performance in Long Beach, so I would not be too terribly surprised if he ends up winning that one too.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Palou has kind of had he has had the best start you could really ever imagine. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he won at Long Beach. I know his teammate did last year, Scott Dixon. So, and for Palou, I know it's a little too early. Obviously, the grid ranking is just debuting now, but he was 4th last year in the grid ranking. And then in 2023, if it wasn't for Max Verstappen having one of the greatest seasons in motorsport history, Palou was 2nd. So for that, and then I know back in 2021, Palou was also 7th in the grid ranking. Palou is one of the best drivers, having one of the best starts ever to like an IndyCar career. I mean, if you look at his statistics too, I mean, 13 wins in just 83 races, that's pretty damn good. So I think Palou can make it 3 for 3. And I think now, I know we're going to touch on, obviously the grid ranking, a couple MotoGP guys have been up front the last year specifically, but one of them hasn't been racing. So we'll see what happens. I think this could be a shot for IndyCar to get it done and have a winner in the grid ranking. And I think that starts with Palou winning more races than he did last year, and he's already tied, I'm pretty sure. So I think he can do it.
Yeah, as far as Alex Palou goes going to Long Beach, I think that it's definitely possible he has a great shot, especially if he gets a great starting position on Saturday. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Colton Herta exists. He is very strong there. Joseph Newgarden had a very strong run there last year. So those two will definitely be major factors coming into next weekend. But Alex Palou has had one of the most insane starts to a season I have ever seen, to come from, I believe, 10th on the grid at St. Pete and not really contend for much of the race. And then they had that blistering pit stop on the final round to circle their way into the lead and then hold on to it despite challenges from both Joseph Newgarden and teammate Scott Dixon. That was a super impressive win. And then to make that late stop at Thermal Club for soft tires and just completely wear out the McLarens and then dust them after that to the tune of a 10-second lead at the end of the event. It was supremely impressive. I think that Palou, for as consistent as he's been, he hasn't really had the top step of the podium finishes that you would expect for someone that's won as many championships as he's won to this point. But I think that he's starting to really put his foot down on the neck of the competition, and a win at Long Beach would pretty much solidify that. And while I do think at the time Bob Pockrass's question to Joseph Newgarden at St. Pete was extremely silly, to be like, do you think that you can compete with Palou for the title? And Newgarden said, it's race one. I'm starting to wonder if maybe Bob knew something we didn't. So, yeah, I definitely think that Palou's got a great chance going into Long Beach, assuming he gets a great qualifying session in. But again, he's proven he can win even without that. So maybe we just need to say he's got a great chance regardless of circumstance.
Palou looks hard to beat, but this is IndyCar. IndyCar's notorious for being so competitive. Almost any one of those 27 drivers could win. So it's going to be really interesting what happened in Long Beach. I think qualifying will be a huge key to that. Let's talk about another notable racer, Marc Marquez. He crashed out at Circus of the Americas. That cost him 7th position, most likely 2nd place in the grid ranking, because he had done 2 for 2, just came up short of 3 consecutive wins. But Christopher Bell in the top 10, in the top 5. First time we had a driver in quite some time. Of course, 3 consecutive wins there. It's worth noting there are only 34 listed. That's because Sebastian Ogier only has 1 start this year. In the grid ranking, you have to have at least 2 race starts to be scored in. So, assuming Sebastian Ogier either starts a 2nd race or he becomes one of the drivers not in the top 5 World Rally Championship, then there'll be a 5th World Rally Championship driver. But very interesting. In that top 10, you have all 7 series in the grid ranking represented. That means Formula 1, Formula E, IndyCar, MotoGP, NASCAR Supercars, and World Rallies Championship all represented in the top 10. Tanner, starting with you, out of all the 7 series, which one stands out as sort of the most unpredictable or predictable series?
I would have to say that NASCAR of these has to be one of the most unpredictable, just by the sheer variance of tracks that they go to. Obviously, you start the season on a quarter-mile paved oval that's completely flat and is super hard to come by, and then you go throughout the season. You have a street course, several different road courses. You have big tracks like Indy, Pocono, Michigan, and you also have super speedways like Talladega, Daytona, Atlanta. So you have all this tremendous variance in NASCAR, plus all of the engineered gimmicks that they use to try to shake the race up, such as stage cautions and things like that. And due to those factors, I'd say that NASCAR is easily the most crapshooty of these 7. But as far as the most predictable, part of me leans towards Formula One for obvious reasons. As we just discussed for about 30 minutes, they couldn't really pass this past weekend, and that was rather unfortunate and was not quite the show we all thought we signed up for. But at the same time, you have races in F1 like Australia, where the rain pelted the track so hard that everybody was sliding off the tarmac. So, as predictable as F1 can be at times, it still has an unpredictable nature to it because it's auto racing, and nothing is ever certain in auto racing. As far as these 7, though, I have to lean towards IndyCar at this point in the season, because at this point, the only person that's won is the same guy, and he's done it in tremendous fashion both times, and it's been done both times without really dominating either of the races. So you have to wonder what's going to happen one of these times when Palou actually gets control of a race at a reasonable point and takes over from there. So, yeah, as far as these 7 are concerned, NASCAR is definitely the most unpredictable, but at this point in the year, I have to give the most predictable crown to the fastest series on Earth in IndyCar.
Yeah, Tanner, I have to agree with you. I think IndyCar is probably the most predictable at this point because it looks like Alex Palou could potentially go on a Max Verstappen-like dominant run in the series, given how him and the number 10 Chip Ganassi team are continuing to execute week in and week out to almost perfection. It's been incredible to see what they've been able to do. I wonder if they can continue this dominance all season, but if it keeps up, and they go out, start off, 1, 2, 3 wins, then, you can probably say the IndyCar will be very predictable. I also think if Marc Marquez can stay on the bike and not have issues, given how this Ducati bike, fits his riding style, I could definitely see, him, winning most of the races in MotoGP, assuming nothing else goes wrong. So if I had to pick right now, it would be a tie, between IndyCar and MotoGP as being most predictable. The reason why I didn't include Formula One in that, because, you obviously have Max Verstappen and the 2 McLaren drivers. I feel like it'll be a toss-up between those 3 in most races. Maybe you see Ferrari, and Mercedes get up there at some point as well.
Yeah. For me, too, I agree, especially the way IndyCar has started. I think it's too early to tell, though. However, I want to throw in not only MotoGP for predictable. So NASCAR obviously is most unpredictable. I've been writing for Grid Ranking and doing the charts, and it's always changing, especially when certain drivers get hot at certain times. That's the most unpredictable. Predictable, I can say IndyCar, yes. I can say MotoGP because it seems like the same 4 guys seem to win. And then F1, same idea. But I want to throw in supercars too. And I think it's because we've seen, even since the Shane Van Gisbergen era, I think a little after that now, I think it's Will Brown, Brock Feeney, Cam Waters, and maybe Chaz Mostert are usually the 4 guys that are up there, with Brody Kostecki now being up there again. But it seems like those 4 are always up front. So I would say they're some of the more predictable ones. I don't think we expected Cam Waters to sweep the first weekend. But those 888 cars are always fast, and I think we'll see that again because Will Brown was 3rd last year, Feeney was 6th last year, so it's like I think that one's going to be predictable again. But then obviously World Rally, if Sebastian races, then that is predictable because he seems every time he gets in that car, it's either first or second. So yeah, that's how I feel about that one.
I'm a little surprised that Formula E traditionally has been one of the most unpredictable, where we even had the old Formula E Wheel of Destiny just because it seems so random. But Oliver Rowland, 2 wins there, still very early in the season. But MotoGP, it just seems if it has a name Ducati on it, and especially Marc Marquez, I mean, he could have been 3 for 3, but he had crashed out. And the chat room, Kim, we got Ben there. Counterpoint, Verstappen needs to change his name to Max Palou, referencing how Alex Palou has been dominating overall. So it's going to be a fun year. Of course, definitely encourage everyone at gridnetworktv.com to check it out. With that said, let's go to our one shining moment.
Yeah, time for our Grid One Shining Moment from this racing weekend. If you're watching here live or on replay, let us know down in the chat what's the one thing that stood out to you, from this racing weekend, whether it was Formula One at Suzuka or NASCAR at Darlington. And Tanner, we'll let you go first. What's your Grid One Shining Moment?
I don't want to take the shine away from either of your three's shining moments, but man, I just feel so much for Ryan Blaney. After today's race. In the last 50 laps, he took a pit stop, he put on fresh rubber, and had a 6-lap tire deficit to the leader, Tyler Reddick. He had a 5-lap deficit to Christopher Bell in second, and a 3-lap deficit to William Byron in third. And over the course of the last 45 laps, Ryan Blaney overcame a 17-second deficit to the leader in a swarm of traffic all around the racetrack, whether it be cars he was actually trying to pass or ones he had to maneuver around that were laps down. And we haven't really seen someone in this next-gen era really be able to, even with a tire deficit, your car falls off at a certain point and you stop passing cars, but Ryan Blaney's number 12 throwback to his dad was just on a completely other level today. And it's a true shame that he never really got to take the front of the field and, run away with the race like it seemed like he would have been capable of doing, because it just seemed like as the run got longer, he just got faster. So, yeah, for him to have, over those last 50 laps, come all the way from, I believe, 17th and 17 seconds behind to take the lead in what would have been the win had we been running in really any other series on Earth. It was extremely captivating and impressive. And if you looked with 20 laps to go, Ryan was 7.5 seconds behind, which was the exact length of the front straightaway at Darlington Raceway. And within 10 laps, he had passed 2 cars and had gotten up to the rear bumper of Tyler Reddick. So my shining moment today goes off to the Dutch boy number 12, Menards Ford. And it's really unfortunate you guys didn't win the race today, but those are the breaks.
Just the way it goes sometimes. Unfortunate break for him. My shining moment, I would have to say, comes from NASCAR as well, too, as another driver that did not get the win. It's going to go to Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, he has struggled this year, and of course we know this struggling has been occurring since the start of near the playoffs last year. He's just seemed to hit some bad luck and just been having bad luck week after week after week. He has a rookie crew chief. They just been to the point where we've been talking about them. What's going on with that team? Do they need to hit the panic button? Well, now they got their first top 10 finish of the year at Darlington. The track too tough to tame. For a driver that's still pretty new, that has to build up, I think, his reputation. I mean, he's no driver that has a fair share of controversy from his past in the Xfinity Series. I think he really needs to take this opportunity. Okay, we got a top 10 finish. We ran a pretty clean race. We didn't do anything to where people are mocking us like what happened at the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium where he went airborne. If he can start putting together these smart runs, proving that he is getting better as a driver, I think there's a lot of potential for Ty Gibbs. He is my shining moment.
Yeah, for me, I guess I have 3, so I'll be quick. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been on the show a while, so I'm cheating a little bit. NASCAR, for me specifically, I think William Byron just leading the first 243 laps was absolute insanity. He had the best qualifying lap. He was one of the fastest in practice, and he kicked butt for the first 2 stages. I think he was like the first most laps ever led to start a race at Darlington, some of the most laps ever led in the next-gen era to start a race, and probably some of the most laps ever led to start a race in the NASCAR Cup Series. And then unfortunately, he finished second. So I think that's my one shining moment, is to show that this car is, they want to create parity. Some guys can just go out there and give a nice butt whooping, and that's what Byron did at the start. And he still scored 56 points, even though he finished second, because he swept the stages. So he's my NASCAR shining moment. I want to touch on Formula One. I think what we haven't talked about, and I hope I'm not stealing Kobe's here, my one shining moment from Formula One is actually Kimi Antonelli. And I think he set 2 records a lot of people might not care about. I'm sorry, Kobe. The youngest driver to ever lead a race, and he's the youngest driver to ever set a fastest lap. That's pretty damn impressive for an 18-year-old kid. It really is, especially in a sport like that, where it's one of the most dangerous motorsports. They're all dangerous, but Formula One's definitely up there in terms of the speeds and stuff they do. So I'd say that as one of them, especially Kimi Antonelli. Shout out to him. And then the third one, I think the whole Grid Network team, especially for the Grid After Dark. I was trying to think what it was called. I'm sorry. I think what they were able to do, put on a show for a Grand Prix that unfortunately wasn't as exciting as we wanted it to be. But I think that team, I believe there was 5 of them, did such an incredible job. So I want to give them a shout out to that. So those are my 3, and I apologize to Kobe, but I know he's smarter when it comes to Formula One and stuff, so I know he'll be able to add to that.
Yeah, it's all good. I'll just expand upon what you said with Kimi Antonelli. I just think it's really incredible what this 18-year-old kid has been able to do, and I will admit, I thought that Mercedes were making a mistake by moving him up too soon. I know Kimi Antonelli, we've heard that name on the road to F1 ladder, for the last few years. That there's this wonder kid, this once-in-a-generation talent, Kimi Antonelli, that he could be the next Max Verstappen to take the Formula One world by storm. And when I was looking at his records in the junior categories, in almost every single series he's been in, absolutely dominated that championship, hands down, multiple wins, the unquestionable champion of those series. Then last year he gets to Formula 2, where I will say he was a bit humbled. I know Mercedes thought he was so good, that, hey, we don't even need to put this kid in Formula 3. We're just going to move him straight up, into Formula 2. And last year, he didn't do what we typically saw from him, in the series they competed in, where he would, be the unquestioned, champion, the most dominant driver in the series. Last year, had a lot of growing pains, and he was only able to win a couple of races instead of, winning multiple, and winning the championship, by a lot. End up finishing, just outside the top 5 in that championship. I believe in Formula 2. It was just a year where I expected a lot more from Kimi Antonelli, given where he was. But as our own Joshua Birch put, in a great wrap up at the end of the year of the Formula 2 season, that Prima, the team he drove for in F2, had an uncharacteristically down year. So I guess you can blame, some of that on Prima, and not having their cars where they should have been for Kimi. I'm sure if Prima had the F2 car locked in last year, we probably would have seen Kimi Antonelli go on a run. So I thought the fact that Kimi, wasn't able to go out and dominate F2, I thought that maybe he needed another year. And then, as you remember, Kimi went, had his FP1 debut last year at Monza, his home race in Italy, and ends up crashing in FP1. And I'm thinking, yeah, they're moving this kid along too fast. And then we get the confirmation that he's going to replace Lewis Hamilton alongside George Russell. And then I'm thinking, oh, this kid, it might be, a big trouble for him. And then looking at these first 3 race weekends of the year, great finishes for Kimi. Got a 4th place in Australia in treacherous track conditions there. We had all the mixed conditions, so it was a really difficult race, and he handled it just like a pro. And then a pair of 6th place finishes in China and Japan. And then, as Matthew mentioned, youngest ever race leader and fastest lap setter as well. That's incredible to do at 18 years old. And I'm just looking at the list of youngest world drivers champions in history. The youngest is, Sebastian Vettel at 23 years, 134 days. And, Kimi is just 18 right now. And given what we're seeing from him and the potential we have now, he's 18 years old. Sebastian Vettel was only 23. If Mercedes can get back to their dominant winning ways, I will say this now, I would not be surprised if Kimi Antonelli ends up becoming the youngest Formula One world champion in history.
He just missed out on the youngest podium, but still a lot of potential for the young driver. And we have a lot to talk about throughout the race week ahead. Grid Encore will be on the air tomorrow. Ben and Brandon Crossland. Then Wednesday, Grid Tonight, Kobe Lambis, Joshua Birch, and Matt White. The latest Grid Endurance Performance Index Week 2 will be posted. Thursday, Grid Live Pre-Race, NASCAR Cup Series, Bristol Motor Speedway, Bristol, baby. We cannot wait for that. Then Saturday, Grid Live Pre-Race, Formula One, IndyCar. Then Sunday, we'll wrap it all up. Plus, don't forget, we'll be recorded Women in Motorsports to preview the F1 Academy, Jeddah weekend, and so much more, including some big news from sports car racing we'll be highlighting on the Women in Motorsports. Subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs. And of course, big thank you to our Patreon, Colin Show, Mark, Robert, David, Matthew, who are invested in the Grid Network team. And of course, visit gridnetworktv.com. Matthew's post will be going up, and across social media, the grid ranking is being posted as we speak. For Kobe, Matt, Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.